The arrival. The night sky over the alien world was not quiet. Strange colors painted the heavens, shades of violet, gold, and burning red. The ground seemed alive, glowing softly beneath Ethan's boots as he stepped out of his ship. He paused for a moment, breathing in air that felt both sharp and sweet, like metal mixed with honey. Ethan was the only human here, alone on a planet no map had ever marked. He had crossed light years, leaving behind the safety of Earth. Not for fame, not for gold, but for something deeper, a hunger for connection, for meaning. Still, as he looked at the endless horizon, he wondered if this search would destroy him. The forest around him whispered with life. Tall silver trees swayed though there was no wind. Their leaves shone faintly, almost as if they were alive with their own thoughts. Shadows moved between them, quick and quiet, never staying in one place long enough to see. Ethan gripped his scanner, though it gave no warning. The machine was silent, yet his heart was not. Something was watching him. He could feel it, not like the eyes of an enemy, but the gaze of someone curious, almost hesitant. He took another step, boots pressing into the soft ground. The soil glowed brighter where he walked, as if marking his path. Each step felt heavier, not from fear, but from the weight of being the first human here. Every sound mattered. The distant hum of creatures, the soft crack of branches, his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. He reached a small clearing, where a pool of water reflected the strange sky. The surface shimmered with tiny sparks of light, like stars trapped beneath the waves. Ethan knelt, touching the water with his glove. It rippled in circles, but then, suddenly, it rippled back, as if answering his touch. His breath caught. Water should not do that. He leaned closer, scanning, but before he could finish, a sound rose from the forest. Not an animal cry, not a storm, but a voice, soft, melodic, almost human. Ethan froze. His scanner showed nothing, but he knew it was real. Someone was near, someone who had spoken not with words but with tone, a greeting or perhaps a warning. He stood slowly, careful not to frighten whatever was out there. "Hello," he called, his voice steady, though his chest tightened. The trees swayed again, this time with a rhythm, as if the forest itself had heard and answered. Then he saw it, a figure in the shadows, tall and slender, moving with grace unlike anything human. Silver eyes reflected the light of the glowing trees, watching him from the edge of the clearing. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. It was not a beast, not a threat. It was someone alive and aware. Ethan's throat went dry. This was the moment he had crossed the galaxy for. Not machines, not ruins, not empty silence, but a meeting, a connection. The figure stepped closer, careful, cautious. The silver eyes did not blink, but they did not shine with hatred either. Instead, they carried a question, silent but powerful. "Who are you, human, and why have you come here?" Ethan raised his hand slightly, showing he had no weapon. "My name is Ethan," he said softly. "I don't want to harm you." The figure tilted its head, listening, the silver eyes narrowing with thought. No reply came, only silence, and yet the silence itself felt alive. Then, in the quiet, Ethan understood something. This was not just arrival on a new planet. This was the first step into something far greater than exploration. This was the beginning of a story that could never be undone. Behind him, his ship stood like a shadow, waiting to take him back if fear won. But Ethan did not step back. Instead, he stood his ground, heart racing, as the silver-eyed figure finally whispered something. A word that sounded like music, yet carried weight. A word that would change everything. Ethan did not know its meaning, but he felt it in his bones. The bond had begun, and the forest, the sky, even the stars themselves seemed to listen. The human had arrived, and nothing, not time, not fear, not even the endless void of space, would ever be the same again. The encounter. The forest grew silent, almost too silent. Even the strange, glowing insects froze in the air as the figure stepped into the clearing. Ethan's breath caught when he saw her clearly for the first time. She was not human, and yet she was not so far from human either. Her skin shimmered faintly, like moonlight on water. Her hair fell like silver threads, glowing faint in the night. But it was her eyes, two silver pools that seemed to hold stars inside, that locked him in place. They watched him, sharp yet soft, curious yet guarded. Ethan wanted to speak, but his words felt heavy. For a moment, he only listened to the quiet rhythm of her breathing. She was real, alive, standing before him. And somehow, she was not afraid. "Hello." Ethan tried again, his voice steady but gentle. The alien woman tilted her head, listening as though every sound was new. Her lips parted, and then she spoke. The voice was like music, soft and flowing, carrying meaning though Ethan did not know the language. He froze, not understanding, yet the tone told him everything. She was not warning him, not threatening him. It was a question, a careful reaching out, like someone opening a door, but keeping one hand on the handle, ready to close it. Ethan slowly placed his scanner down on the glowing soil. He raised both hands, palms open. "No danger," he said softly, "no fight." The words were simple, but he hoped the meaning would carry through his voice, through his eyes. The woman stepped closer, each movement graceful. The silver glow of her skin touched the air around her. When she stopped just a few steps away, Ethan felt his heart thunder against his chest. He realized something. This was not a beast, not a mindless alien. This was a person. Her eyes scanned him as if reading his soul. Then, carefully, she raised her hand. For a moment, Ethan thought she might strike, but no. Her fingers hovered in the air, almost touching his chest, but stopping just short. Ethan did not move. He stood still, letting her decide. And then she whispered something, just one word. A word he did not know, yet it carried warmth. It sounded almost like a name. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest, as if the air between them had changed, as if the distance between human and alien had just shrunk. Not fully, not completely, but enough to plant a seed. The silence stretched. The forest waited, and then a sound broke through, loud, violent, a roar from deeper in the woods. The ground shook, trees rattled, and the silver-eyed woman snapped her head toward the sound. Her calm vanished in an instant. Ethan saw her body tense, her glowing skin brighter now. Without a word, she turned and stepped back toward the forest. But then she stopped. She looked over her shoulder, silver eyes meeting his once more. Ethan understood. The roar had been a warning, not from her, but from something else, something dangerous. And though she could vanish into the shadows, she hesitated, as if she wanted him to follow. His choice came in that moment. He could stay safe near his ship, or he could step deeper into her world. The world of danger, of mystery, but also the world where she lived. Ethan tightened his fists, then nodded. "I'm coming," he said softly, even if she could not understand the words. The woman's eyes flickered with something new. Was it surprise or approval? She turned fully, leading the way into the trees. Her steps were light, barely touching the ground. Ethan followed, clumsy in comparison, but determined. The forest swallowed them. Glowing branches bent overhead, shadows stretched long. The roar came again, closer this time, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Ethan's pulse raced, yet he kept his eyes on her. She moved like light through darkness, and he felt safer near her than he should. They reached a ridge where the ground opened to a vast canyon. Far below, creatures with scaled bodies and burning eyes crawled over the rocks. Ethan's stomach tightened at the sight. Predators, massive and hungry. The woman raised her hand, whispering words that sounded like a prayer. The glowing trees around them dimmed, as if obeying her command. Ethan stared in wonder. She was not just another being. She was connected to this world. The forest listened to her. Even the light seemed to bow to her voice. She turned to him once more, her eyes bright in the dimness. This time, her lips formed words more slowly, carefully, And though Ethan did not understand her language, he felt the meaning. "Stay close, human." Ethan nodded, whispering under his breath, "I will." And in that instant, something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but a bridge had begun to form. A fragile bridge made not of words, but of presence. Two souls standing against the unknown. The encounter was only beginning, and Ethan knew with every beat of his heart, whatever came next, he could never turn back now. The bond. The canyon below was alive with danger. Creatures moved in the shadows, their scales glimmering red like burning coals. Each roar shook the air, making Ethan's bones tremble. Yet when he looked beside him, Liara stood calm, her silver eyes steady. For a moment, Ethan wondered if she was fearless, but then he noticed her hands, just slightly trembling, hidden at her sides. She was not without fear. She simply carried it with strength. Ethan felt a strange spark of respect. This world was hers, filled with monsters and storms. And yet she did not run. She faced it, even when her body warned her to flee. The roar came again, closer this time. From the shadows of the trees, one of the scaled beasts rose. It stood taller than both of them, eyes glowing, claws tearing the soil apart. Its gaze locked on Liara first, then on Ethan. It smelled the stranger, the outsider, and its hunger grew. Liara stepped forward, her voice rising in a strange song. The trees answered her, their glow dimming. The beast hesitated, snarling, confused by the shifting light. But then it lunged, too fast, too strong. Ethan did not think. He moved, pulling the small pulse blade from his belt. He shouted, throwing himself between Liara and the beast. The claw struck, sparks flying as it scraped his armor. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he stood his ground. The beast roared, furious at the resistance. Ethan swung the blade, its blue light cutting across the scaled hide. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to wound. Enough to make the creature stumble back. Liara gasped softly, her silver eyes wide. She had not expected him to fight for her. Humans were strangers here, fragile, weak compared to her world's predators. But this one had stood in front of her. The beast circled, ready to strike again. Ethan's chest heaved, his blade shaking in his grip. He could not win, not against something this big, but he would not run. The creature lunged again, and this time Liara moved with him. She raised her hands, whispering in her language. The glowing soil around them flared to life, blinding the beast. Ethan struck once more, driving the blade into its chest. The beast roared, stumbling back into the canyon. Its body crashed against the rocks before vanishing into the depths below. Silence followed, heavy and deep. The forest seemed to exhale, the danger gone, for now. Ethan dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm where the claw had cut through the armor. Liara rushed forward, kneeling beside him. Her silver hands hovered over the wound, glowing softly. Ethan looked up at her, his face pale but calm. "You're safe," he whispered, his voice rough. Liara's eyes softened. She pressed her glowing hands against his shoulder. Warmth spread through him, the pain easing. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling as she spoke words he could not understand. But Ethan felt it. It was not just healing. It was something more, an intention, a promise. For the first time, she touched him not with caution, but with care. When the glow faded, the wound was closed. Ethan flexed his shoulder, amazed. Liara pulled her hands back, her eyes searching his face. She whispered again, slowly, carefully. This time he caught a single word, repeated twice. "Brave, human." Ethan almost laughed, breathless. He nodded. Brave, maybe, but foolish too. Though she did not know the words, she seemed to understand the tone. Her lips curved, just barely, into something like a smile. The forest around them grew quiet again. But between them, something had changed. No longer strangers standing apart, but two beings who had fought side by side. Ethan realized he had proven something. Not just strength, not just courage, but that he was willing to risk himself for her. And in her eyes, he saw the shift. The first fragile thread of trust woven into place. Liara stood and helped him rise. Her hand lingered in his longer than it should have. For a moment, neither pulled away, and though no words could bridge their worlds, their silence spoke louder than anything else. As they moved back into the trees, Ethan glanced at her. "Why do I feel like this is only the beginning?" he whispered under his breath. Liara looked ahead, her silver eyes glowing faintly. And though she said nothing, her expression carried the same truth. The bond had begun, not of blood, not of language, but of choice. Two paths that had crossed by fate, now walking side by side. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the forest, other eyes watched. Eyes filled with anger. Eyes that would not let this bond grow without a fight. The conflict. The forest no longer felt the same. Where before it had whispered with mystery, now it carried a weight. Every tree seemed to lean closer. Every shadow stretched longer. As if the world itself was watching Ethan and Liara, waiting to judge them. Ethan followed her deeper into the glowing woods. His arms still sore where the beast had struck, but his mind sharper than ever. Something had shifted between them in the canyon. A fragile bond, unspoken yet undeniable. But bonds in a world like this were never simple. They reached a wide valley where the trees thinned, and Ethan stopped in his tracks. Figures were waiting there, tall and silver-skinned like Liara. But unlike her, their eyes did not shine with curiosity. They burned with suspicion, with anger. There were 6 of them, armored in living vines that glowed faintly. Each carried long blades that pulsed with light. Ethan's breath slowed. These were her people, and they were not welcoming him. One of them stepped forward, his silver eyes sharp. He spoke quickly, his words like steel. Ethan couldn't understand, but he didn't need translation. The tone said everything. "Why is a human here?" Liara's voice rose in answer, calm but firm. She stood between Ethan and the others, her arms outstretched. She spoke in her flowing tongue, her words carrying both defense and defiance. But the leader only snarled, his gaze fixed on Ethan. The blades of the warriors hummed, as if alive. Ethan raised his hands, palms open. He tried to speak, but his voice caught. What could he say to them, when even his presence here was an insult? He was an intruder in their world, and no proof of courage would erase that. The leader shouted something, and 2 warriors stepped forward. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Were they going to kill him? He glanced at Liara, who shook her head sharply, her silver eyes locking on his. "Stay," she whispered, the single human word she had learned. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. The warriors circled him, blades glowing brighter. Ethan forced himself not to move. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to defend himself. But Liara's voice held him still. She spoke again, faster this time, her tone sharp like fire. Her people argued back, their words rising like storm winds. The valley echoed with their voices, until at last silence fell. The leader's eyes narrowed. He pointed his blade at Ethan, then lowered it to the ground with a strike. A warning, a threat, but also a test. Ethan understood, barely but enough. They would not kill him yet, but they would not accept him either. Every step he took beside Liara would be watched, judged, and one mistake would mean his end. The warriors turned and vanished back into the forest, leaving only Liara and Ethan in the valley. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That could have gone worse," he muttered under his breath. Liara's eyes softened, but her face carried shadows of worry. For the first time, Ethan saw doubt in her. Not doubt in him, but doubt in what this bond would cost. Her people had made their warning clear. If she chose the human, she would stand against her own blood. If she let him go, the bond they had begun would die before it could grow. The forest stirred again, this time with the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Storm clouds glowed with unnatural light. Lightning cracked in colors Ethan had never seen, green, violet, white. The world itself was rising against them. Liara looked to the sky, her face pale. She whispered something under her breath, a word filled with dread. Ethan frowned. What is it? She turned to him, silver eyes reflecting the storm. Trial, she said softly, the word heavy in her mouth. Then she pointed to the horizon where the storm gathered. It was not just weather. It was a test, the planet's way of judging him. Ethan swallowed hard. He had already faced beasts, already faced her people's anger. But this was something far greater, a storm that answered not to nature, but to will, to spirit, to truth. He met her gaze and nodded. Then let's face it, he said. Liara's lips parted in surprise. For a moment, her eyes glimmered with something bright. Hope or fear, he couldn't tell. But she gave a single nod. Together, they stepped forward into the coming storm. Behind them, unseen in the shadows, the leader of her people still watched. His silver eyes narrowed. The bond between human and alien had survived the first clash. But the true conflict was only beginning. The choice. The storm raged through the valley like a living beast. Green lightning split the sky, tearing across the clouds in violent arcs. Rain fell not as water, but as glowing mist, stinging Ethan's skin where it touched. The ground itself shook, alive with the fury of the world. Ethan stood against it, his armor sparking under the strange rain. His body ached from every step, but he refused to fall. Beside him, Liara raised her arms, her silver glow pushing against the storm. She whispered words in her language, songs of power and plea. The storm bent around her voice, but it did not stop. It wanted something, Ethan realized. Not her or him. The storm was watching him, judging if he belonged. And in its rage, it demanded a price. Through the flashing light, figures appeared. Liara's people had returned, standing on the ridges around the valley. Their silver eyes gleamed in the storm, cold and sharp. The leader stepped forward, his voice booming louder than thunder. He pointed his glowing blade at Ethan. Words poured from his mouth like fire. Ethan didn't understand them, but the meaning cut deeper than language. Leave. Go back. You do not belong here. Liara shouted back, her voice fierce, her body trembling. Her words were not a request, but a challenge. She stood before Ethan, protecting him, but the leader's answer came like a blade through her heart. She must choose, her people or the human. Ethan froze as the storm cracked above them. He looked at her, saw the pain in her silver eyes. She was torn apart by two worlds pulling at her soul. One was blood and duty, the other was him. He stepped forward, his body shaking from a storm, his voice rough but steady. Don't choose me if it means losing yourself, he said. The words tasted like ash, but he meant them. He would not be the chain that bound her. Liara turned to him, her face pale with disbelief. Her lips trembled as if the human words had cut her deeper than the storm. She reached out, fingers brushing his chest. Her voice broke as she whispered, "No, I cannot lose you." The storm roared louder. The earth cracked beneath their feet. The leader raised his blade, shouting a final command. But Liara stepped forward, her glow blazing brighter than ever. Her voice rang out, echoing across the valley. "I choose him." The words were not in English, but Ethan understood. The meaning struck like lightning through his chest. She had chosen, against her people, against her world. For him, for the bond they had built. The leader's face twisted in fury. The other warriors stirred, their blades humming. Ethan raised his own weapon, though he knew it would never match theirs. But before blood could fall, the storm itself exploded with light. A wave of power swept across the valley. The warriors staggered back, shielding their eyes. Only Ethan and Liara stood firm. Her hand clutched his, their glow and his defiance blending into one. When the light faded, silence followed. The storm clouds broke apart, the rain vanished. The valley lay scarred but calm. The test had ended. Ethan breathed hard, his hands still locked in hers. The warriors stared down at them, silent now. The leader's blade lowered, his eyes dark with rage, but also with fear. For in that storm, Something greater had spoken. The world itself had seen her choice, and it had not destroyed them. Liara turned to Ethan, her silver eyes soft with something deeper than trust, something eternal. "You are mine now," she whispered in broken English. "Forever." Ethan's throat tightened. He could not find the right words, so he simply held her hand tighter. The choice had been made, and nothing could undo it. But far above, in the silent shadows of the ridges, the leader watched with eyes like ice, his voice low, filled with venom. "This is not the end," he swore. "The bond may have survived the storm, but war was coming. The eternal vow." The valley lay in silence after the storm. Shattered trees glowed faintly, their broken branches whispering in the strange wind. The warriors had gone, their silver eyes burning with anger, but retreating into the shadows. Only Ethan and Liara remained, standing together among the scars of the earth. Ethan's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His body ached from wounds and exhaustion. But all he could see was her, Liara, glowing faintly in the fading stormlight. Her silver eyes locked on his, filled with something he had never seen before. For the first time, she did not look cautious. For the first time, she did not look torn between two worlds. Her gaze carried only one truth. She had chosen him, and she would never turn back. Liara stepped closer, the soft glow of her skin brushing against his. Her hand trembled as she lifted it to his face. Her fingers lingered on his cheek, delicate yet sure. She whispered something in her language, low and trembling, the words like music, like prayer. Ethan could not understand them, but when she pressed her forehead gently against his, he felt the meaning, raw and eternal. It was not just affection, not just trust. It was love. Tears stung his eyes before he could stop them. He had crossed galaxies, walked into danger. He had thought himself a wanderer, forever alone among the stars. And yet here, in this broken valley, he had found someone who saw him, truly saw him. Liara pulled back slightly, searching his face. Her lips parted as she tried to shape human words. "You made me yours," she whispered slowly, her accent soft, her voice shaking with truth. "Not by force, not by fear, but by heart." Ethan's chest tightened. No words came to him, only feeling. He placed his hand over hers, holding it against his cheek. "I don't want forever without you," he said softly. Simple words, but each carried the weight of a vow. Her eyes widened, shimmering like liquid silver. For a heartbeat, she looked almost fragile. Then her glow brightened, flowing from her hands, her skin, her very soul. She leaned closer, her lips barely brushing his ear. "Forever," she whispered, this time steady, this time unbreakable. The vow hung in the air. The forest seemed to listen. Even the scarred ground pulsed with faint light, as if sealing their promise. Human and alien, bound not by chains but by choice. For a long time they stayed there. No sormos, no blades, no enemies. Only two souls who had found each other in the endless dark. And for that moment, nothing else mattered. But peace never lingers long in a world divided. High above the cliffs, unseen by their eyes, the leader of Liara's people watched in silence. His hands clenched on his blade, his silver eyes burning with fury. "This bond is poison," he muttered. "If she defies us, she defies the stars themselves." The vow had been made, and now war would follow. Back in the valley, Ethan pressed his forehead to hers once more. He whispered words he knew she did not yet understand, but he spoke them anyway. "I love you." Liara closed her eyes, though she did not know the word. She felt it. She lived it. And in her heart, the vow echoed louder than any storm. Forever. Forever. The dawn rose slow over the alien sky. Golden light spilled across the valley, touching the scars left by the storm. The broken ground still glowed faintly, whispering of what had been tested and what had been chosen. And in the center of it all stood two figures, a human and an alien, their hands locked together, their bond unbroken. Ethan gazed at Liara. Her silver skin shimmered in the morning light. Her eyes, once filled with caution, now carried only warmth, a strength that came not from her world, not from her people, but from a vow they had spoken. They had faced beasts, storms, and blades. They had stood against her people's judgment. And still, they remained side by side, not by accident, not by chance, but by choice. Liara's people had vanished into the shadows for now, but Ethan knew their silence was not surrender. War would come, anger would rise. The bond they had forged would not be left in peace. Yet when he looked into her eyes, he no longer feared it. For the first time in his life, he understood what strength truly meant. Not weapons, not armor, not survival, but this, a connection that no storm could break, no blade could cut, a love that had crossed the stars. Liara lifted his hand, pressing it against her chest, her voice soft but steady as she whispered, "You are mine forever." Her words were imperfect, broken in human tongue, yet more perfect than anything he had ever heard. Ethan's throat tightened. He leaned closer, his forehead against hers. "In your mind," he whispered back, "no matter what comes." For a long moment, the world was silent. Even the forest seemed to pause. The trees swayed softly. The soil glowed faint beneath their feet. It was as if the planet itself had accepted their vow, as if it too had been waiting for this. Far away, in the hidden halls of Liara's people, the leader's voice thundered with rage. He swore the bond would be broken. He swore the human would fall. But oaths of hate mean little against vows of love. Time passed. Seasons turned. Battles were fought. But the story of the human and the silver-eyed woman spread like fire across the stars. Some called it betrayal. Others called it destiny. But to those who knew the truth, it was simple. It was forever. Legends whispered that even when death came, their souls did not part. That when the stars burned out and the universe grew silent, their voices still echoed together. Two hearts, one vow, unending. Ethan had once believed he was only a wanderer, a man adrift among galaxies, searching for something he could never name. But in Liara's arms, he had found it. Not a place, not a people, but a forever. And Liara, once torn between duty and heart, once bound by fear of breaking tradition, found her freedom not in turning away, but in holding on, in loving the one who had risked everything for her. Together, they had defied storms, beasts, and blades. Together, they had spoken a vow that even the stars had heard. And so the story ended where it truly began. Not in battle, not in fear, but in love. A love that time could not weaken. A love that distance could not break. A love that was not human, not alien, but eternal, forever.